Hey Jean. Okay, so this is not the worst experience I ever had, but it's up there. So basically, I'd arrived at the city, and there were issues with my paperwork, which basically meant that overnight I had become an illegal alien. Um, and this meant that I would not be able to have access to any hotels, apartments, or anything, and I wouldn't even be able to look for work. Luckily, I had made friends with this one guy, and I never really understood what his job was, but basically, he worked near some officials, and he said he would be able to lobby on my behalf to get my paperwork through faster, which was really nice of him. But while we waited for that to happen, he let me stay at his apartment for a few days, which was nice. But he lived with his wife and two kids, and the apartment wasn't really big. Um, and while they were all very nice to me, I knew that I needed to find like a different place. Um, and then there was this idea that maybe I would be able to stay with his sister's husband's parents, who they had like a really big apartment, were rather well off, and had the space to host me, and seemed willing. The first red flag was that this friend of mine was kind of worried about leaving me alone with them, and kept trying to warn me that they were kind of hard to live with. But I didn't want to bother him any more than I already was, and I figured I could survive a few weeks with them. Plus, I met them, and they seemed like a really nice older couple. So yeah. He wasn't convinced, but he assured me that he would try to get my paperwork through as fast as possible, and he introduced me to them. And yeah, I got to move in with his in-laws, and at first everything was okay. They were really nice, but then it started getting a little tense, and I'm not sure how to describe it. And I I feel weird like talking about them this way because they were really nice in like hosting me when I needed it, but also it was the most confusing situation because at first they were nice and they were interested in my travels. They asked me questions. They seemed like interested in me and liked me. But then they started to get like cold and mean, and I never really understood why. Um it felt like they were looking down at me. It's hard to explain, but they started making these comments that were like indirectly kind of really insulting to me. Um, and also, little by little, almost all our interactions were reduced down to me listening to them complain about the state of the world. I lost track of most of what they complained about, but I do remember how they seemed to have like a sneering contempt for almost anyone. And from what I saw, they seemed to be disgusted by culture and things that they deemed sufficiently foreign. What exactly they considered foreign was lost on me, but I suspect they considered me foreign. And worst of all, they would just like rant incessantly during dinner, and then they would look at me. It felt like they were trying to judge how I would react, which was so rude and it felt so awkward for me. They also kept insulting my friend's job because his job was to like help people who were in my situation, I think. And although they acted polite to his face, um, but I think he knew that given how little he wanted to spend time with them. Oh, Oh my god, the worst part, Jean, the worst part was that they started acting like every little thing that I did, any space that I took up in that apartment was a huge inconvenience. And I was used to feeling like an inconvenience, but I had never been treated with such contempt before. It was miserable. Um, and I tried to be helpful. I tried to help them out outside the house. I tried to ask about how could I help, how could I do anything, and they did not want me to touch anything. In the end, I just started to stay outside as much as I possibly could. I ended up going to like a downtown neighborhood that was really dense and where I wouldn't be bothered by my lack of papers. And I would spend hours at this bar that was really crowded. I'd buy a glass of juice and then I would just sit there for hours sketching. And I was worried that since I could only afford to buy one glass for the entire day, they would be annoyed with that. And for some reason, I also started drawing portraits of the various customers. This turned out to actually be kind of popular, and in the end, I didn't even really need to worry. The servers were really nice to me. I even got to meet some of the regulars. That part was actually really nice. Oh, it was also really funny. The traditions for portraits back then there was for the subject to scowl at the viewer, creating this deep and striking expressions on the canvas. So it was very funny that I would spend like half an hour with this stranger giving me the meanest glare, and once the painting was over, they would break out into the widest smile. It was funny. And eventually my papers did get through. I managed to book a hotel, and I did not talk to the in-laws ever again. And eventually, after a few days after that, I was able to leave again.